Hi, we are joined from the West Coast, isn't it, America? By the amazing Dr. Liz Powell, author of Building Open Relationships, speaker, coach, psychologist, and the absolute guru in anything non-monogamy. We'll get onto the ethical non-monogamy bit. It's too many long words there for me to say, but just we were chatting, before we went live, and it's a complete minefield, and it's there's so many bits to it, and a lot of people. I mean, I was saying even me after like 16 years of KK is trying to keep up with what everything means. Just for in layman's terms,
sure.
Can you explain the different in non-monogamy? What are the different things from open, poly, swinging,
Sure.
just all the different what it encompasses?
Sure. So ethical non-monogamy in general is kind of an umbrella way of talking about different ways that people set up relationships that have varying degrees of flexibility around sexual, social, romantic monogamy, or non-monogamy thereof. So depending upon the people doing it, they may do varying degrees of closedness versus openness. Swinging, for example, is a fairly long-term established version of non-monogamy. Swinging is usually practiced as a couple. So couples engage in activities together. They go to clubs together. They go to parties together. Sometimes they will play with other couples, but it is a very couple-oriented version of non-monogamy. It also tends to be fairly heterosexual leaning, fairly cisgender centered. And it has, depending on the area, kind of better or worse politics around things like consent or racial justice. Yeah, there's a lot of swinger culture can be rough. There are some folks, particularly in younger generations, trying to bring more consent and negotiation and queer friendliness and trans friendliness into it. And it's a little bit older school a lot of the time. There's also monogamish, which is a term coined by Dan Savage. And some people will use that to say that they have a primarily monogamous relationship where they occasionally have outside sexual encounters. Sometimes people will use that to talk about a generally monogamous relationship that recognizes that over the course of a lifetime, at some point, someone is probably going to hook up with someone else, and creating spaciousness for understanding about the difficulty of monogamy as a lifelong commitment. Open relationship can be a term used for a whole variety of different things, depending upon how people use it. Some people use that to mean that they have outside sexual relationships, but not romantic relationships. Some people use that to mean that they can have any kind of relationship that they want. It's very dependent upon the person. Polyamory is the practice or intent of having multiple loving relationships with the full knowledge and consent of all those involved. Polyamory can be hierarchical, where there are primary partners and then secondary and tertiary partners. Hierarchical polyamory is defined by a structure in which there are people who have more power over relationships at lower levels than the people at those lower levels have over relationships at higher levels. So strict hierarchies can fairly quickly get into ethical gray areas or not particularly ethical areas, depending upon how that power is held and negotiated. There's also non-hierarchical polyamory. I think the biggest misconception about non-hierarchical polyamory is that means everybody is treated completely equally and you have to give everybody exactly the same thing. And that's not the truth. The same way that if you have a best friend and then some good friends, you spend more time with your best friend and tell different things to your best friend than you do to your good friends. Non-hierarchical polyamory just means that the people who you are more attached to or closer with don't get a say in what happens in your other relationships. So they don't get to tell you who you can or can't sleep with, what you can or can't do with those people. There is solo polyamory, which is what I tend to identify with. And solo polyamory is about folks who want to have multiple loving, committed relationships, and they don't want to do that in a way that is about becoming encoupled. So we talk a lot about the relationship escalator in like heterosexual monogamous culture, we're all taught that the way relationships go are like first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the baby and the baby carriage. And so it's a one-way trip, and you have to keep going all the way to the top. And if you don't reach the top with someone, that means it was never meant to be. You never speak to them again. You start back at the bottom with someone else. So solo polyamory is instead about looking at finding the things in a relationship that work well for you and not needing it to like escalate in a certain way, not needing it to like have specific things happen. So people who are solo poly may not ever want to live with someone else. They may not want to get legally married. They may not want to entwine finances or have children. So it's about practicing relationships as individuals who care very deeply about each other, but who aren't like subsuming their identities or subsuming their autonomy into the relationship that they're a part of. And then another one that's commonly talked about is relationship anarchy. Relationship anarchy in a lot of ways is very similar to solo polyamory. Relationship anarchy basically looks at relationships and says, why is it that we have a separate category for people we feel romantically or sexually towards than people we're friends with? Like, why is it in our culture that the person you've been dating for 2 months is supposed to have priority over the friend you've had for 10 years? So instead, relationship anarchy says, let's just treat all relationships as their own individual entities and let each of them find their own level and not have like an automatic prioritizing of like sexual or romantic connections over platonic ones. Relationship anarchists often within their relationships don't have rules. They may not even have agreements in terms of how they practice it. It may just be boundary focused in terms of communicating like, here's what you can do if you want to interact with me in these ways. If you want to do other things, that's fine. It may mean that I don't want to do these things with you. I don't identify personally as a relationship anarchist, largely because when I was coming into the non-monogamy communities in like 2014 to be like more fully involved in them, most of the relationship anarchists I met were jerks who just didn't want to have to like deal with their partner's feelings about things. So they were like relationship libertarians, and that's just not my jam. But there are these days some much better examples of relationship anarchy. I've just found that solo polyamory is a better fit for me.
Got you. I know, as you were describing that, I thought maybe I'm a relationship anarchist, and then you said they're jerks, and I'm maybe I'm not.
I mean, again, there are now some great relationship anarchists, like Kevin Patterson, who I do Unfuck Your Polyamory with. He's a relationship anarchist, and he's fabulous. And like, you know, we all have our different labels that we're drawn to for different reasons.
Yeah, well, I say, and only it rang true in that I'm a big, and I always say it to friends and people, and that don't people put too much expectation on one person to tick every single box, to be their best friend, to be their lover, to be the one you discuss politics with, to do the one you travel with. It's sort of I say you have different people for different things, and I've very much got that really strong relationships with different. Yeah, my husband's the only one I sleep with, but they're very strong relationship with friends. And I remember coming into this relationship going, because previous ones hadn't wanted me to hang out with my mates and hadn't had issues, and I was like, no, not happening. These are my mates. I will spend equal amount of time and be selfish and have. So there's that kind of that bit. So maybe I'll put that on me, relationship anarchist.
Yeah. And I think, you know, the thing about the way that most of us learn about relationships in Western culture is that it is very much this, like, they are your everything. They're the only person you talk to about these things and the only person you do this with. They should be with you at everything. There's a lot of people who, if I invite them to come hang out with me, they assume that their partner is invited. And I'm like, but I didn't mention that person. Yeah. Like, if I wanted them there, I would say it. Like, when do you get to be a person separate from them? And I think that because there's that pressure for that person to be your everything, it feeds into this culture that like mononormativity and heteronormativity create, that is about like coercion and control rather than true autonomy and consent. If we look at how a lot of people approach their relationships, it's about, you know, Kevin has great memes for this that he shows every time we teach, which are things like, what are you smiling about? Your happiness is sitting right here. Where there's this idea that because you're the person who has to meet my needs, I get to do whatever I need to do to get you to meet those needs for me. I get to tell you when you get to spend time with friends. I get to tell you how you dress. I get to tell you who you can fantasize about. I get to tell you whether you get to watch porn. Because if you're not doing what I want, I don't get my needs met. And I think that scarcity and that need for one person to be everything makes it really hard for people to stay ethical in the way that they interact with each other. I think what non-monogamy could teach a lot of monogamous folks is this space of like creating more freedom for each other to do what is right for us, even if it's not the best choice for our partner. That if what you really want is to go see the ballet and your partner hates the ballet, why don't you just find a different person to go to the ballet with? Like, why force your partner to do something they don't enjoy that doesn't feel good to them because you want to do it? And this practice, instead of giving spaciousness for us to like different things, to be separate people, to need separate time, to need separate interests, so that we can enjoy our own lives.
Yeah, because there's a lot, because that, a lot of it is people, you hear non-monogamous, then immediately everyone jumps straight into the sexual side. If you're non-monogamous, then you are sleeping with loads of people. And actually, it's interesting listening to you, because what I didn't realize, and actually it makes sense, is that everyone should have non-monogamous relationships, because you need the different people to tick the different boxes, and that's healthy. And you see, I don't know how you feel, it always gets on my tits when I speak to her girlfriends and they're like, oh yeah, my husband wouldn't let me do that. He wouldn't let me do that. I'm like,
is he your owner? Is he your parent? Like, how is this working? Like, why are they giving you permission to lead your life? Like, that's not healthy, right? No. We would never, in my book, I talk a lot about when you're talking about your romantic relationships, would you allow a friend that level of control over your life? Like, if your best friend said, look, we're best friends, so you're not allowed to be super close with any other friends. We watch Grey's Anatomy. You are not allowed to watch Grey's Anatomy on your own, and you're definitely not allowed to watch Grey's Anatomy with other people, because that is cheating on our friendship. It sounds ridiculous.
Or if they were messaging you the whole time when you were away from them, and you wait, who are you with? Are you with other friends? How dare you be with other friends? It just you would get rid of that.
Are you going to our restaurant? Why are you going to our restaurant without me? That's our restaurant, right? And I think there's this way that we like paper that over when it's a romantic or sexual relationship that isn't healthy. I get asked a lot about jealousy. The most common thing people say to me when I say like, oh yeah, I'm non-monogamous, I have multiple partners, they're like, oh, I could never do that. I'm just so jealous. Don't you ever get jealous? Jealousy is the only emotion, like romantic and sexual jealousy is the only emotion that we're like, well, if you might feel it, you can't ever do it. If what you're doing might ever make your partner feel that, you are not allowed to do it. Here's the thing. There's a lot of challenging emotions that we deal with in our day-to-day that we recognize are just part of living. Let's talk about grief. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. My country, the United States, we've lost over 500,000 people already. Should you never get close to someone because they might die? Right? I've had a partner I was dating die while we were together. He was like 47 years old. It was a heart attack out of nowhere. Should I not love anyone ever again because they could die on me? That's a much harder emotion than jealousy. Like, having someone that you're in a relationship with suddenly die is much more challenging than jealousy. So why is jealousy given this particular status of you can never ever do anything that might cause a partner jealousy? It doesn't make sense. Jealousy is a normal emotion. A lot of times, jealousy is a very useful emotion because it lets us know about something that we're insecure about, or about something that we want that we're not getting, or about a fear that we have.
And that we care, and that we actually have feelings a lot of the time. Sometimes you just think it's fun, and then you have a bit of jealousy and you go, actually, I do quite like that person more than I thought I did.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean you get to enact your jealousy. That doesn't mean you get to like take it out on people, but it's a really good road sign for you to figure out what's going on. For me, in my non-monogamy, I get jealous sometimes. And when I notice jealousy coming up, usually what it's telling me is that I'm feeling unstable in this relationship, that I feel like I don't know where I stand with this person, that I feel like I don't know where we're at, or that I can rely on them in terms of being there for me and being stable for me as a partner. So when I notice that jealousy, it's really important. It's giving me really good information that I need to notice and pay attention to. That doesn't mean that I then tell them to stop dating other people. It means that I then look at what do I need in this relationship to start feeling more secure, in order to start feeling like this is going to be a good relationship, and I can return to a space of encouraging them to have fun with other people.
And what on when it comes to jealousy, because obviously that comes up loads, and obviously with with KK and the events and just in this world in general, there is that, and you don't really know. We get a lot of first timers and newcomers come in who go, we just want to try, and it's their first kind of outing into non-monogamy world, and they don't know how they're going to react. So what advice would you give people on that and dealing with it when it comes up, because you can't really predict until you're in it how you're going to feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing I want to tell folks is, if you're feeling jealousy, that's okay. Like, your feelings are your feelings. Your feelings are always valid. Your feelings may not be based in reality. So like, this is one of those, a lot of what I talk about in my work is complex, nuanced things that seem like they're opposites but aren't. Your feeling being valid does not mean that it's based in reality. A lot of times the feelings that we're having are based on stories that we have about ourselves or about others or about the world. And so the feeling that we're feeling is real, and it's important for us to make space for us to have that feeling. And it is also on us to take a step back from that feeling and look at it from like a wider perspective to see, like, is this feeling giving me good information, or is this feeling giving me not so great information? So when you feel jealousy, that's a great moment for you to like take a breath and ask yourself, like, what is this about? What is this bringing up for me? Is this I think that person is prettier than I am, and so I'm really worried that my partner's going to like them more than I do, or more than they like me? Is it I am worried that the primary reason this person is with me is because I'm really good at sex stuff, and so if someone else is good at sex stuff, I don't know what I mean to them? Is it I don't know how I feel about me in this relationship? Is it I feel like this person isn't feeding our relationship, and now they're giving all this like good, shiny energy to this new person, and I'm feeling like I'm not getting good, shiny stuff anymore? Like, what is the jealousy telling you? What is it? What's the story there that you have with it? Because that's where the good stuff is. That's where you can really learn and figure out what you need. If what's coming up for you is an insecurity, that's a great thing for you to work on your own. It's a great thing for you to ask your partner for some reinforcement around, to say like, hey, so my brain is telling me this really weird story that person is like way hotter than me, and you're not going to find me as attractive now that you've had like some playtime with that person. So can you just let me know what you find attractive about me? If what's coming up for you is that you feel like your relationship isn't being fed, then you can figure out, like, what do you want, right? If what they're doing is like spending this really interesting time with someone else, and all you get is like laundry and TV couch time, then like maybe it's time for a date. Maybe it's time for you to spend some time really focusing on each other. Jealousy gives you information that's really useful for building your relationship.
Yeah, and rather than and it's very easy, isn't it, just to go on the attack and put it on, you're doing it wrong, and actually a lot of the time I always say to people, if you with that jealousy, just take a step back and see where it's coming from, because a lot of the time it's your insecurities and it's on you, and it's you. If you work through it, you go, it's not actually, all that person's done is smile at another person, and I'm just having a bad day. It's just one of those days.
And if it is that someone's treating you poorly, jealousy can be a really good sign of like what you're not getting, of like what they're doing that's not working for you. Because like we all deserve in our relationships to be able to talk about what we need, what we want, what feels good for us, and to expect that our partners will either give that to us or help negotiate a different way for us to get that, or let us know that that's not available so that we can make a choice.
Yeah, and on that whole communicating thing, because that's probably the biggest downfall in all relationships, whether it's business relationships or romantic relationships, friendship relationships, is that the assumption of things without actually having the conversations and communicating, which often isn't what you think it is. I mean, so many times, you see that and people fall out just because they've assumed things or just not communicate. So on that, what's your advice on people that might have been together like 10 years or a couple of years or whatever, or even single, who suddenly go, actually, maybe I'm not cut out to be completely monogamous, and actually I'd quite like to think about that or try that, and I know this person, the person I'm with, my husband, ticks all these boxes, but actually I've realized that we're not in sync on this bit. And what's your advice on having those conversations without offending your partner?
So a couple things. First of all, I think that anytime you're bringing up a significant change to a relationship, it's going to be challenging and it's going to be difficult. And so I think a helpful goal is to figure out how to take care of yourself and ride through that challenging phase rather than trying to find a perfect way. I see a lot of folks in my practice who come to see me for coaching or therapy who are like, well, but how can I phrase this conversation perfectly so they won't get upset? And the answer is you can't. We can do things to increase the likelihood of a positive conversation, and they might get upset. We don't get to control how other people feel. It's really manipulative to try to find the exact phrasing that will ensure that they can't possibly be upset at you. That's super manipulative and not okay, right? What I recommend, though, is for stuff like non-monogamy, I think a lot of times people go into that conversation with their partner like they're giving them a cancer diagnosis. They're like, I'm so sorry. I have something really hard to talk to you about, and I have this desire to have sex with other people, and I recognize that may be really hard for you and you may hate it. And that is setting you up for failure. You've already set the frame of that conversation as putting them on high alert coming into it. What I think is a better way to do it is to think about what do you love about this person and this relationship? What do you want to stay the same? How can you validate what you love as the start of this conversation? And then how can you talk about what you want to change in a way that's about what's exciting and fun and what the benefits could be for both of you? So presenting this as honey, I love you so much. We have such a good relationship in so many ways. I really love the way that we've been taking care of the house together and that we've been alternating cooking nights. And I love so much the way that you kiss me and the way that we cuddle. And you are so important to me, and I want to keep you in my life. And I've been reading about this non-monogamy stuff. And I think it would be really fun for us to find ways to empower each other to explore with other people. I think that you are one of the hottest people in the world, and I love having sex with you. And I want to see what it's like with other people too. And I'm wondering if you've ever had curiosity about that, because I think it would be really fun for me to know that you're having fun too. I don't want either of us to feel like we have to be each other's everything. I want us to be able to have experiences together and separately in this way where we get to connect with more people.
Nice. It's similar to the picks up drinks, mic drops. It's similar when we often get asked, as in that bit about KK, it's how do you approach that kind of coming all that whole just or watching porn or trying toys, not feeling threatened by a dildo coming into your relationship. It's a similar kind of. But do you think we are? Because I've read loads, and there's been much more chat in the last few years about just us naturally just not being as animals non-monogamous. Do you think with how society is, and that actually it's getting more and more? I mean, what do you think?
Who knows? Here's the thing. When it comes to what is natural about humans, that's nearly impossible for us to deduce because there's none of us who are raised outside of a culture. So whatever it is that we are leaning towards or that we're doing is going to be strongly influenced by the culture that we're raised in. And I don't know that naturalness matters as much as each of us being empowered to choose what feels best for us. What feels best for me is not going to be the same as what feels best for other people. And it doesn't matter which one of us is more natural. because like just because it works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for anybody else. I think that there are some people who in themselves are just kind of more monogamous. I have some people I know, some friends I have who just like when they're super into one person, they're just not really into other people. And that's kind of how they are. And it's not that they aren't okay with people who are non-monogamous. It's not that they wouldn't ever consider it. It's just like, they don't really have that desire.
Yeah.
That's fine. There are some people I know who, like me, monogamy just does not feel right for us at all. And when we try to be monogamous, it feels stifling and it feels hard and it feels crushing and exhausting. And I think there's a whole bunch of people in the middle who could maybe kind of go either way, depending on who's in their life, depending upon what supports they have, depending upon what opportunities they have to explore other communities or other ways of being. I think, it's up to each of us to really sit with, like, what am I doing and why am I doing it? Am I living my life and having my relationships this way because it's genuinely what I want and what feels best for me? Am I doing it because it's what I've always been told to do? Am I doing it because it's what I think good people do or it's the right way to do things? If it's one of those external reasons, it's worth unpacking that and looking at, like, is there a way that I would feel more whole, that I would feel more in alignment? And can I move towards that?
It's hard, isn't it? Because there's so much like, religious and culture and societal kind of messaging, and that's sort of in us. It's in our bones, in our DNA. It's hard to kind of really kind of get into the depth of what we really want without instantly shutting it down as no, we can't. So on that, what's your advice on people thinking about it and they might not be in a social group where they can talk about it, or a family where they can talk about it? Where do you think if it kind of is eating, it's kind of like coming out, and of where's the best place to find that sort of the non-monogamy kind of, not community, but that sort of
it is community.
Yeah, it is community.
I think that you do need to find some kind of community, and depending upon where you live, there's more or less chance that that's going to be able to be in person. So the more rural an area that you're in, the smaller the town, the farther from major metropolitan areas, and the more conservative the country that you're in, the more likely it is that the community you find will have to be online, just because it's less safe for people to have in-person community there. It's less safe for people to explore things there. If you're in like the swinger side of things, there are swinger clubs kind of everywhere. So it's a little bit easier to find swinger community than like polyamorous or other kinds of open communities. But there are online spaces. There are various like swinger websites or dating sites. If you're more of that swinger persuasion, there are a lot of Facebook groups for non-monogamy, though, like, how much I recommend those is like a lot of the Facebook non-monogamy groups are kind of a mess a lot of the time. I don't personally do Facebook at all, but some people really enjoy the Facebook groups. You can also look for like large events that happen in areas either near to you or that you could travel to fairly easily. Here in the States, there are multiple sex positive or non-monogamy conferences every year. Over in the UK, there's always, I think it's like Poly Day that happens in London once a year that has workshops, and it's a good place to meet community. So there are ways to find community. And I think once you start meeting a few people, that makes it a lot easier to find more. Twitter is also great for this because there are a whole lot of us non-monogamous folks on Twitter. And even just having people you follow who talk about it a lot can help you feel like what you want is more normal and make it easier for you to embrace what you like.
Yeah, Twitter's a funny one. You get a really strong tribe, and then you get the really trolling tribe.
I just block a lot of people. Anyone I get a bad vibe about, I just block them immediately because I don't need to put up with that. And it's, I'm over 7,000 followers on Twitter now. And like, once you get over like 8,000 followers, your trolling just like explodes. So I just I
do that. Or you go and someone's really annoyed you, and then I look at them first and go, they've got 7 followers, just step away. do not engage with this
just block. Yeah. Yeah. I just block because I don't like my approach to social media is that like I'm on social media in part as a human being and in part as a brand. And anyone who wants to troll me isn't going to buy my stuff and I don't want to be their friend. So like, why is it a problem for me to block them? I would just rather block them and like remove their access to me, remove their access to the people who follow me. Like, let's just get them out.
Yeah, because you wouldn't. They're not. It's not like you'd speak to them in the street or socialize with them in real life. So,
No.
but finally, one of the big things with non-monogamy, you touched on it briefly at the beginning in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
The hierarchy. I can't remember the name of that. Is that the power side of things? And that the consent and the coercive control, and we've seen it in members, and it's not just the obvious female being the one control, but often it's the other way around. And I've actually seen a lot of guys and close friends of mine in really manipulative, controlling, very coercive control relationships. What are your views on that, and basically the signs? And you hear that the excuses. If you hear the excuses coming out of your mouth, then you really need to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me, so like I won't date or be involved with people who are in hierarchies because I don't want that in my life. And for me, like the big problem with hierarchies is that the people who are primaries have more say in what happens in a secondary relationship than the person in that relationship. And like, that's never great. So in general, the questions I ask are like, who has full autonomy and agency and who doesn't? Like, who gets to make decisions? If the people involved in any given like dyad or triad relationship don't have full say over what happens there, if there's some other party that's not a part of that relationship that is getting to choose what happens there or what doesn't happen there, then there's something happening that's not great. I think a lot of people who are newer to non-monogamy do hierarchy first because they're afraid that if they don't have something to like protect their relationship, that the relationship will fall apart or dissolve. The problem with making our agreements or setting up our relationships based on our fears is that we just tend to get stricter and stricter and stricter to try to prevent that fear. As a therapist, I work a lot with people who have histories of trauma. And PTSD essentially is our brain's fight or flight system seeing threats where they aren't present. And if you listen to that and start avoiding things, it'll increase the number of things that you're avoiding on and on and on and on. Because rather than you letting your brain see that that's a false alarm, you're saying, you're right, that's totally good. Let's stay away from it. Like, that is definitely an accurate alarm. Let's stay away. Hierarchy, I think, does the same thing. It lets people say, oh, I feel any kind of alarm, so we're going to shut things down, rather than, okay, let me see if this is a real alarm or a false alarm. Let me see if this is about my feelings or about something actually being a problem. How do I empower my partners to do what is best for them, even if it's not what's best for me? And that's hard. Like, it's really hard to agree to be in a relationship knowing that what you want is for your partner to do what's best for them, even if it's not what you want. But that's the most consent-focused way to do relationships. If my relationship only works as long as my partner is putting my needs ahead of their own, then like we're not really in an even relationship. We're in a relationship about me. And that's not something that I want. I think that's not particularly healthy for anybody long term. Because if someone has to sacrifice their own happiness in order to stay with you, they're not going to be pleased with that in the long term either. The more that we can empower each other's agency, the more that we can empower each other to make the choices that are best for each of us, even if that hurts our feelings, even if that's hard for us to sit with, the more that we can focus on like our own boundaries and our own choices and how we can deal with the realities of the world we're in rather than the world we wish we had, the better off we're going to be.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's putting yourself out there and knowing you can't, as you said, you can't control things, but if the other person being their best self and the happiest does not involve you, then so be it. There's do you like Brené Brown?
Yeah, I love Brené Brown. I love her so much.
Yeah, and the like Braving the Wilderness, that kind of just finding your true self. If anyone wants to read an amazing book of that, just actually, it's just that, isn't it? That
it is.
that power of just, you've got to take the risk, and you might lose friends, and you might, lose family, but you've got one life. And if you're not living the real you, then, what's the point? And whoever you are, there's your tribe, isn't there? Like, you've got amazing communities, and I've got amazing communities, and they're my people, and that's,
Well, and the thing about trying to like use hierarchy or rules to protect a relationship is that like the only way to make sure that your partner is actually following your rules is to handcuff yourself to them and never sleep. Like, if someone's going to cheat, they're going to cheat. It doesn't matter how many rules you have about it. If someone wants to do something, they can find a way to do it. If you can't trust your partner to consider how their choices are going to impact you, why are you with them? And I think that's, we have to trust that our partners care about us enough to consider how their choices will impact us. That doesn't mean that they're obligated to only make choices we'll be happy with. It means that we know that we're being thought about and considered. And so if they're making a choice that isn't what we would choose, we know that they're doing it because it's what is really in their best interest.
Yeah, it's true that I remember having an argument with a girlfriend just before I got married, actually, and they were like, "Well, he's going to wear a wedding ring," because back then it's more now everyone, whatever the gender, you wear a wedding ring pretty much, but it's very much kind of men didn't really, sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't, and I was like, it's up to him. And they're like, well, aren't you going to make him wear a wedding ring? And I was like, well, because he's a sportsman, so it's annoying.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's totally up to him, right? But I said, she was getting married as well, and she said, well, I've told him he has to, because then people see that he's married. And I'm like, if he's going to cheat, he's going to cheat. A ring is not going to stop someone cheating.
Here in the US, they have wedding rings now for men, particularly, that on the inside have engraved things that say like married or taken in reverse, so that when you wear the ring, it indents it in your skin, so that even if you take your ring off, it still shows. And I'm like, that is horrendous. Like, why would you, if you need to go to that length, why are you with that person? Like, exactly. What are you doing?
And that thing, they're still going to cheat, and also they're going to be seen as a bigger challenge to the predators out there who going, oh, it's even more of a challenge to, shag a married man. So it's like, it's a lose, what I mean? It makes no difference. So, but it's been amazing chatting to you. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And we will, we'll put your website and everything up, because there's a load of downloadable resources on there that everyone can have a look if they've got questions. Or just hunt you down on the social media that you're on.
And if you are someone who wants to do non-monogamy and you want to make sure you're doing it in a healthy, ethical way, Kevin Patterson and I have an online course that's available. It's evergreen, so you can start it tomorrow. It's called Unfuck Your Polyamory, and you can find that at unfuckyourpolyamory.com. And that course, one of the ways that we support financial accessibility is it's a pay what you can course. So it's got a suggested price, and then whatever price point you can afford based on your own budget, you can pay that for the course and still get the full content.
Oh, I love that. Hey, what you could actually, you're going to feel a bit of a shit if you kind of try and do it free. It's that reverse psychology of it, isn't it?
Well, I mean, what I've found, because like the way I run my practice as a coach and therapist is I let people know what my full rate is. My full rate is high, so that people who have a lot of money can pay it. And then I ask people what rate they can afford, and people are super honest about it. So like, I would much rather make it available to people who have less money than like price it super high and out of the price range of people who need it.
Yeah, amazing. But you know what? Thank you. And I'm sure we will be doing other stuff together in this crazy journey that we're on. So thank you for doing what you do, and keep doing it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.